Welcome back, Daisy Cakes! Today, we're going to look at the winner of the 1967 Nebula Awards, the Einstein Intersection by Samuel R. Delany. Why? Because I am Daisy Ex Machina, the drag queen detective who investigates all things speculative in science fiction, fantasy, and horror. This is part of my series where I pick a book for my TBR from the nominees of the Hugo and Nebula Awards. I just started folding in the Nebula Awards into this series, starting with 1967, and I picked up the book by Delany because I've said on this channel before that he's one of my favorite writers, but this was a book that I did not recall reading. But first, who was Samuel R. Delany? Samuel R. Delany was born in 1942 in Harlem to a well-to-do, prominent African-American family, and he is still active today, writing from Philadelphia. Now, if you ever meet him, don't call him Samuel or Sam or any derivation of that name. Call him Chip, as that was a nickname he chose for himself at the age of 11 after summer camp, where he became enamored by the idea of nicknames. He has always identified as gay, but he was married in 1961 to a woman, the poet Marilyn Hacker, who herself is a lesbian. They were both 19 at the time they were married. They remained married for nearly 20 years. They had a daughter together in 1974 and are still friends today. Samuel R. Delany became enamored with science fiction after reading Robert Heinlein's Farmer in the Sky as a young boy.
I think the book in the science fiction field that probably had the biggest impact on me when I was a kid was a book called Farmer in the Sky by Robert Heinlein. And it's a book in which the main character tells the story, and he has a pesky younger sister. Well, I also had a pesky younger sister, and so there was something for me to identify with. Well, the whole family emigrates to one of the moons of Jupiter. They're trying to set things up and be good colonists, and everybody's adjusting fine except the younger sister. And she's sickly. Everyone else can breathe the special atmosphere that they put together except her. She has problems with it. They have to give her special this, that, and the other, and she's a real pain in the neck. What I didn't realize, of course, is that Heinlein is setting something up for a big and emotional kick that he wants to give you. And about 3/4 of the way through the story, there's a quake, and something happens. The atmosphere leaks out, and the younger sister dies. Well, there I was at 12 years old, reading this under the covers by flashlight, and I got to this point. The younger sister died. Well, I began to weep copiously, and I just lay there and cried my eyes out. And it was the first time that I knew that any kind of book, and I was fortunate that it happened to be a science fiction book, could actually make you cry. I didn't realize that you could have that kind of emotional response to a book.
Marilyn Hacker, his then wife, was working at Ace Books and helped him get published at the age of 20 with his novel, The Jewels of Aptor, which was published in 1962 as an Ace double, along with James White's novel, Second Ending. Have you ever seen an Ace double? I vaguely recall running across one or two Ace doubles in used bookstores years ago. They were two novels in one. They were back to back. The front cover was on each side, and you had to flip them over to see the cover of the one you were reading. Anyway, over the next several years, he published 5 more novels for Ace, most of them as Ace doubles, before writing the highly acclaimed Hugo and Nebula Award winning novel Babel 17 in 1966, followed by several other notable science fiction novels, The Einstein Intersection in 1967 and Nova in 1968. During the early 70s, he turned to writing erotica, including one piece that was so pornographic and disturbing that no publisher would touch it for over 20 years. He returned to science fiction in 1975 with Dahlgren, one of the most iconic science fiction novels of all times. It's often called science fiction's Ulysses, comparable to anything put out by James Joyce. I absolutely was mesmerized by this book. My mind was totally blown away when I read it, yet I don't usually recommend it to people because it is so hard to read. Reading it is more of an experience than anything else, a slice of life in this twisted, Twilight Zone-like city where time doesn't seem to exist. It's an acid trip, it's erotic, it's twisted. Samuel R. Delany wasn't a very prolific writer during this time period, but in 1984, he wrote yet another masterpiece, The Stars in My Pocket Like Grains of Sand, which I absolutely loved. I remember my friend Sean and I devouring the book. It was a first half of duology that involved a gay relationship, and we couldn't wait for the second half to come out, but unfortunately, it never did. It was inspired by Delany's relationship with the man he dedicated the book to, Frank Romero, but after it was published, the relationship ended, and I think it ended very badly, maybe even violently, and this was the era when AIDS broke out. So the second half, unfortunately, will remain unfinished. I think that relationship really broke Samuel R. Delany. He really never wrote a major science fiction work again. He rarely published anything for the next 30 years, mostly reworking some of his early works, including finally finding a publisher for the pornographic novel he wrote in the 70s called Hog. I was curious about it and read the sample chapter on Amazon, and that personally was enough for me. There is one thing I want to address, and that is a line on Delany's Wikipedia that says he supports NAMBLA. I did a little bit of research, and Delany's support is not from the perspective of an older man who wants to have relationships with underage boys. No, it's from the perspective of Delany when he was underage and he had relations with men, and he rejects that he was a victim and claims those experiences were positive. Because whenever we hear about support for NAMBLA, I'm sure it's easy to assume it comes from the perspective of an older partner for the younger, and this is the opposite for whatever it's worth. If Delany says his experience with older men when he was underage was positive, I'll take him at his word. I won't presume to tell him or anyone how to feel. But for every Delany who may view his experiences as positive, there may be, 10 other boys whose experiences were traumatic. So for me, we as a society have to decide, admittedly arbitrarily, where the age of consent is to protect the majority. And the protection is from those who may be pressured or groomed by adults in authority, like teachers or priests or family members or whoever tries to pressure or groom someone to have sex with them. In America, the age of 18 seems logical to me because that gets you through high school when your parents or guardians are responsible for you. If you think the age of consent should be lower, I won't hold it against you as long as you follow the current laws. Now, let's talk about the book, The Einstein Intersection by Samuel R. Delany, which won the Nebula in 1967. This, in my opinion, is another masterpiece, and I can see glimmers of Dahlgren within it. Why? Because of the writing, the prose. Every turn of phrase, metaphor, every image is so beautifully written, so musical, so deep, you can't help but be moved. Yes, it is literary. I certainly would call it literary. It is also a little bit experimental, not like Dahlgren, which went off the charts, but every once in a while you'll see things like an excerpt from the author's notes writing about the main character. And honestly, that was not my favorite part. I could have done without that. But it does tell me that Delany was swinging for the fences in his writing. And I think overall, mostly it paid off. The story is set in the far, 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 far future of Earth, which has apparently been devastated by a nuclear holocaust in the far past. Certainly there is radiation and lots of mutations going on, and the people left on Earth have divided into three sexes: low, law, and lay, or male, female, and neutral. The main character is Lo Lobi, who goes on a quest to find who killed La Frieza, the telepath that Lo Lobi loved. The quest is surreal, and the glimpses you get of this strange world building of Samuel R. Delany starts getting pieced together the further you go forward with the story. Like the people we're reading about, the people in the story, may not be human. They may be creatures that have been mutated from all the nuclear war, or maybe they're artificial creatures that have evolved, or some sort of spontaneous mutant genesis. It's really thought-provoking and moving. I also understand why it won the Nebula, which is awarded by fellow science fiction writers. I can't imagine any other writer reading this and not being amazed. In fact, let me read you this quote from Aldous Burgess. Samuel R. Delany simply operates on a plane which Robert Heinlein never dreamed of, nor John W. Campbell, nor Take a Deep Breath, Ted Sturgeon, Ray Bradbury, nor anyone else we could have put forward as being a poet. The title is frankly really bad, in my opinion. It comes from the intersection between Einstein's theory of relativity and Kurt Gödel's theory of a constructible universe. And this isn't even mentioned until 80% of the way into the book, and maybe of interest to math nerds, but it didn't really make that much sense to me. This wasn't Delany's title. It came from the publisher. Delany's title was A Fabulous Formless Darkness, which really wasn't that great of a title either. So now, I've been getting physical books for many of these Hugo and Nebula reads, but this time I got the ebook because Delany is still alive, and I like buying books that support the author. But I was curious why I didn't read it back when I was reading Delany way back in the 70s, 80s. Well, I looked up the covers on Goodreads, and the cover I recall seeing looks like a fantasy. By the way, the reason I recall a lot of the covers from that time period was not only was I practically living in bookstores, but I was an assistant manager in a bookstore in the mid-80s. Anyway, this cover looks like a sword and sandals fantasy, not science fiction. And I do remember reading Delany's fantasy Neverion and not really getting into it and thinking I'll stick to his science fiction. So I missed out on the Einstein intersection then, but I'm glad I have finally gotten around to reading it, and I do highly recommend it. But what about you? Have you read, or do you want to read, The Einstein Intersection by Samuel R. Delany? Let me know down in the comments, and while you're there, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel. And keep an eye out for my next video where I pick a book from the 1968 Nebula nominees. Until we meet again, may all the books you read be